All right, so welcome everybody to the Dallas Salesforce Developer Group. I have a special presentation from Manoj Sonawane today on SSO concepts. Manoj will be speaking to us later. We'll hop through our regular business as usual announcements. Ame is not on tonight. He has been caught up in very busy work and expanding his family. So everybody congratulate him when you see him next. He also actually just today got an article published on the Salesforce Architects blog on data governance. That's out there. I'll fetch that link and put it in the chat later. My name is Paul McCollum. Most everybody knows me and is tired of hearing who I am. Moyez Thanawala, the founder of the group, leader, mentor, and good friend of mine, is on the call as well. Please say hi, Moyez.
Hey.
Thank you. So reach out, connect, always open to hear ideas about other good content we can bring for Salesforce developers and ecosystem knowledge and learning here. This is my favorite way to learn things, is sit back and let smart people tell me stuff so that I don't have to study. It keeps me up in my job. So anything along those lines, I am always open to ideas and help. Some of our leaders that are active on Twitter sharing information, their Twitter handles are listed up there. Megan, I think I need to get yours up there. I'll have to shoot that to me later and I will put yours along there. I know you're getting active on the socials. I divide up the Salesforce ecosystem and what we try to keep track of into silos called run by Stack Champions. So I am always looking for people to pick a topic, pick a part of the ecosystem here and bring us information and ideas on sessions to have. So it's usually Ame and Moyez and I kind of hunting down good topics and getting smart people like Manoj here. If you have any desire to do that, add extra flavor to it, please reach out to me. We've got some areas that I would love to see and have a regular slide on all of these topics. So if you've got some time to dig together some news and let me put it on the group and talk about it to people here, I would love to hear from you. So please reach out. I don't have a whole lot of new news and updates. Feel free to ask about and talk about jobs over the chat. If you are looking for a job, please put that in there. As we're talking, if you have stuff to hire, especially now right up front, some of the other chat we'll try and keep focused on the session topic, and I'll try and moderate questions from the side. We do have a YouTube channel. This QR code will take you to one of my favorite pages, which is a calendar view of all Trailblazer community group topics and meetings. So if you've got a few hours or you've got a weekend that you want to hang out with some of the Ohana, or you've got a topic you just want to scan and see if anybody's talking about that can spoon feed content like we do at these groups to you and just absorb it, check that out. It's a great place to go get casual learning. FlowFest started today, actually probably already over. I did not get attend. I got pulled into a client meeting, so I'll have to check out and see who the winners of the first Flow contest was. And Formula was a news update from last month, but if you didn't hear it, it's a website somebody has built, open sourced it, and it does real-time formula computations. You can put data in it, run formulas against your variable that you store in your data and see what the output is, as opposed to running it or just getting the syntax bad error on Salesforce. So it was a great find. I'm adding it to my favorite tools. God, Nana had one that was a Salesforce Google. I'll have to go find that. That's another one that should be on here. That is a Google search that has been curated, I believe, by Dan Appelman to target specific sources for Salesforce, for Googling Salesforce topics. So I'll put that in here in a little bit. But no other news from me today. I did not have a whole lot of time to scrape anything together. Moyez, I don't know if, well, I'll ask you later. I've got a slide for you. Adam Olshansky and I, hopefully this weekend, will be recording our third session on DevUp, trying to teach people who have no development background what they need to know if they want to move into dev inside of the Salesforce ecosystem. So kind of sliding over from Salesforce focused as opposed to developer history. We're putting together, it's actually an 8-session series on what dev concepts you need. So hopefully there'll be a new one of those out on our YouTube channel this weekend. If I get my act together and get all the stuff I need before we talk about it, I'm behind on that. Huge thank you. So Moyez, the UNT program reached out to Accenture, the UNT Dallas reached out to Accenture, and somebody got my name, and Moyez pitched me the idea of sending it out to the user group. So we created an event and got a good number of volunteers and fully staffed a mock interview program for UNT Dallas. So I met at least 4 members of our user group on calls where we were getting together to guide new grads through the interview process, tips and tricks. I was extremely, I blushed on the call. I was very honored that our group, our Ohana, stepped up and was on Saturdays and evenings show up. So huge shout out to Nalima and Ramya, Rajesh. I know Sujay volunteered. We had a couple other volunteers. I don't know that they called on all of them, but it was, like I said, it was humbling to be on a call and meet people that had responded to that request and showed up and gave their time and helped these kids out. And there was a lot of good stuff they needed to know. And I think we're going to help them add some very basics to their program and may do that again. So that was great. So thank you all for being open to that. Community representatives, I don't think, and absolutely, Ron, I think we can repeat that at UTD. And I'm hoping that I can do a Salesforce for Youth at either UTD or UNTD. So you let me know. Oh, cool. Well, yeah, and I told you, Moyez, I have a slide for you. Hold 1 second. So Megan's not here. Megan, hopefully you can chat and share if you have anything going on in the military space. Looks like she's not in the panelist. Did we lose Megan? We lost our other Megan. Okay. So sorry for that. No military updates for today. I think she posted her ID in LinkedIn and then vanished. So spam her mercilessly. Just kidding. She's a great connection for anybody dealing with working and trying to get into the Salesforce space with military. Good people. We just lost her for a second. All right. Waqas, you have the floor, sir. What do you have for us for security today?
Sure. Thank you, Paul, for having me. Today, we're going to take a step up from code and probably share like a tip around third-party risk. As you all may be aware, there is increased focus on third-party risk. And there are more than one way of interacting with Salesforce and third parties from a technical standpoint. This is not like a understanding of like third-party risk from a process standpoint or from an operational standpoint. This is more from a technical standpoint. Are you able to see my screen okay?
I can. I want to check. Can everybody else see Waqas's screen?
Yes. It's
Great. Thank you.
So today we're probably not going to be looking at code and looking at like examples of code. This is more of a best practice hygiene type of tip today. So how do you go about looking at third-party risk in Salesforce, right, from a technical standpoint? There are many moving pieces, and I think I can probably open the floor around like different ways that they think you can integrate third-party solutions in Salesforce. I've compiled a list, and I can go through that list and then maybe open the floor for folks to jump in and say, hey, you missed this, or you don't, there's another area that is very interesting from a third-party risk perspective. So the first one is remote sites. Of course, everybody should be aware of the fact that these are endpoints that your server-side code, your Apex, or your workflows can talk to. So that's, number one area that you want to look at, like what are the third-party sites that you are integrating it with, and if there's a reason for them to be existing. And if there isn't one, then it's best practice to remove them if they're not being utilized. External services is the another way of integrating third-party APIs. And this is all your Apex and your flows can speak with them and send data and get data back. So another third-party integration point that you should review as part of your Salesforce implementation. Connected apps is another avenue, and shouldn't be any revelation for anyone. This is basically apps who, based on their permissions, can have unfettered access to your Salesforce environment. And you want to review like what connected apps you have. An easy thing to do is like, what if you have lots of apps, like look at the last time an app was used. And if it's been like years since that app was used, chances are that that's not being in use and there's no point in granting access to that app. So you can easily remove that third party. The other third-party integrations that you can have with Salesforce is you can expose REST services. So this is your Apex code that can be called from external entities. And we've seen like at least there are 1 to 2 REST services exposed by a Salesforce environment that we look at typically. So it's another area of understanding, like, are you exposing your data through REST services? And if there's a use case for it, and if there isn't one, then you should disable those endpoints. The other third-party integration endpoint is what's called CSP sites, which is basically content from third-party websites, which can be loaded in your Salesforce environment. So this, again, can create third-party risk for you. If that content gets compromised, your Salesforce is at risk, right? So making sure that you have only the needed CSP sites and having those as trusted CSP sites, and not like, a publicly monitored job board or something like that, which you're integrating. Because once you integrate that site into Salesforce, you're giving it more access to your content, right? So you want to make sure that there's a business use case for that CSP site. The other third-party integration is what is called the CORS allow list, which is basically sites, third-party sites, which can call into your Salesforce APIs or your REST services from the client side. So think of these as like these widgets that you have in, your another application, maybe from like Slack or something, or you have an integration in Workday that talks to Salesforce. So for that to work from the browser, you need to create an allow CORS policy for that application. So another area to look at from a third-party risk perspective is looking at who you've allowed to speak to your Salesforce environment and if there's a use case for it. Another way of having third-party risk in your environments is external objects. A good practice for all data is to trust nothing, right, until you have verified that data. But that's especially true for third-party data that's coming into Salesforce. And one way of that is through integrations, but also through having external objects, which is basically all data is external to Salesforce and you're just consuming it as an external object. And of course, the third-party risk where there's a lot of emphasis from a security perspective is any service accounts. So if you utilize any service accounts within Salesforce and you've shared those out with third parties, then auditing those and making sure that there's a use case for that. So this is the list that I came up with, and if there's any other, everybody else is welcome to jump in and share their thoughts.
No, it's a great punch list to validate all those open points.
All right. If not, then back to you, Paul.
That's great. Cool. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Wakas, very much. All right. All right. It's a new upcoming segment that I'm hoping that we have regularly, and a little preview of next slide, Moyez. For next month's session, I've got another slide for that. But if you're sharing, you should be able to go ahead and take over. Welcome to the Moyez Minute.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. I've got one item to share today, and that is an upcoming event. I'm hoping that you're seeing my big screen here that says UTD Student Salesforce Competition. Can you see that screen?
I can, yes. That's
Okay, excellent. So, Paul, thank you for this 1 minute. I'll actually take up exactly 1 minute. We used to do these events where we do stand-ups of Salesforce orgs for charities. That unfortunately kind of got put on hiatus during COVID. We're trying something new this year, and we're looking for volunteers. This year, it's a stand-up. It's not a brand new org. In this case, it's an org that we stood up for the God's Child project a few years back. It's a charity that helps kids who are at risk for either financial reasons or other reasons. And I've got some wonderful stories to tell you about some of the really fantastic work that God's Child project does. We're going back to them with some additional help. This time it's a UTD student competition. Dr. Ron Bowes, who's on the call with us, has been instrumental in getting these students together. I think as of this morning, we have 118 participants who are going to help solve some of these Salesforce issues that God's Child project has. I think we have something along the lines of 20 different user stories that we're going to implement for them. It's over the course of a few days. And the UTD student group has come to us and asked us for mentors for the student competition. Let me tell you a little bit about the competition itself. Let me see if I can get there. So Salesforce stepped up and they're providing a $5,000 prize for the winning teams in this competition. And in this case, the competition is going to center around the growing needs of the God's Child project. It's a great group. What we need right now is mentors. So we're going to set up, I believe, around 20 teams, and the teams will need mentors. And we're hoping that a good portion of those mentors can be folks from this group. You'll work with one or more teams to help develop and execute a solution around these user stories. And there's a lot of richness that goes into this, right? The mentors will sit in on client discoveries, and they have this concept. Dr. Bowes has set up this concept of value add educational sessions where Salesforce presents a session for an hour and other industry experts present sessions to the teams for an hour, and the teams get to learn about different capabilities of Salesforce. So the mentors will obviously get to sit in on those sessions. This is a co-sponsored by Salesforce. Here are the dates that I need you for, right? Team formation between now and March the 4th. We'll have really our kickoff session on the 10th of March, and the competition itself runs from March 21st to April 8th. I think we get caught up with spring break is, I think, right after March the 21st. So it's not like spending every day mentoring the students, but on and off.
More
it's
is
from-
the spring break is actually the 14th through the 18th. So it's
That's
just
right.
before the competition.
Okay. So we start right after spring break and we finish on April the 8th. There is a judging portion to this thing, and the mentors are going to be key leaders in bringing these user stories to a completion. I'm going to paste into the chat the sign up sheet. Let me see if I can get there. There it is. We'd love to get at least 20 volunteers who can mentor the various teams. As far as the talent that these mentors need to have, really not deep dive dev knowledge. Most of the user stories are based around configuration and kind of just understanding what's happening within the God's Child Project org and adding a few features here and there. So if you have any of those types of skills, we'd love to have you on this project. And I'll take questions for 30 seconds if Paul, that's all right with you.
Of course, absolutely.
Any questions, comments? All right. Please, if you would go to the form, sign up. We'd love to have you as a mentor. Thank you.
And what do you think that the time commitment for this would be?
I think, as I said, it's not a daily thing. I think it's meeting with the students maybe an hour to 2 a week, maybe 3 hours a week. But mainly the students are going to execute on the project. The mentors are there to make sure that their approach is basically sound. So
Okay.
my assumption is about 3 hours a week is the time commitment.
Okay.
And it's over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks, right? So, yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct, yeah. And here's Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, thank you very much for sponsoring this competition. Dr. Bose has been instrumental in bringing this competition to UTD students, to the Dallas Developers Group. He's been instrumental in lining up Salesforce for their donation of the $5,000 prize money. I think this is going to be fantastic. I think this is a new element of how the Dallas developers do stand-ups.
Yeah, thank you, Moez. And can I just make one other comment that we started a Salesforce curriculum at UT Dallas a year and a half ago. And so as we get more and more students in it, I would love to get plugged into the Dallas Developer Group for guest lectures and things like that as well. So.
Great. And we used to, and kind of centered it around UTD, the Salesforce for Youth program, which has kind of been shuttered too, which was an all-day let's learn how to code in Salesforce for high school, juniors and seniors and freshmen and sophomores at UTD college, whoever. And I'd love to get that started back again whenever it's ready. So whenever it's time to go in person and try and do those trainings, especially for those kids who have had their career train derailed by COVID.
Yes.
So,
yes.
All right. Well, great. Thank you for that. I will resume sharing. All right, Moyez, and you're still on the mic though. I'll let you go ahead and talk through this briefly.
Thank you, Paul. So next month, I'll be presenting on a topic that I think is becoming quite popular, and that is the Health Cloud, the Salesforce Health Cloud. There's a lot of features in the Health Cloud that are not specifically health only, right? There are features that I feel should have been opened up to the Sales Cloud in general, but they've been reserved for the Health Cloud. So I'll be talking about those items. And then specifically, Sarah and this is the first time I'm doing a presentation with my daughter, who is a soon to be doctor. That's Paul put that in. My daughter is a pre-med student at UTD and also an MBA candidate at UTD. This is the first time I'm doing a presentation with her. She's been exposed to Salesforce for a long time. I think the first time that she had any exposure was during the God's Child project 5 years ago when we did their stand-up. But Sarah and I will be doing this presentation. Really what it's targeted at is there's a group of new objects and the methods that go along with those objects that that Salesforce offers within the health cloud. And what we're seeing is that a lot of Salesforce implementers are coming to this implementation, coming to health cloud implementation, assuming that their client is a medical office. Health cloud is a lot more than that. It really encompasses the entire spectrum of service providers, of payers, of pharmaceutical manufacturers, of distributors. So we'll be talking about, if you're implementing health cloud today, which of those methods and objects need to be utilized and leveraged for your particular application. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I hope you join us next month for a session just like this.
Thank you. Yeah, the health cloud is on fire. So great topic to learn about and be able to angle and use in your career. Well, I'm glad we didn't have a whole lot of news because regular business. Manoj, thank you. You are up, sir. We are ready. You want to take over presenting? Thank you for that, Moyez. I'm looking forward to that very much. I may have mentioned we've got Steve Mollis in a few months as well that will, he is a veteran problem solver. He is very active on the answers.salesforce.com, and he'll be coming to give something around formulas and patterns around that. So excited there. And then hopefully LWR, and then Apex, or then developer security practice with Amit Chowdhury coming up. So make sure you're watching for our invites. Those sessions will be announced soon. All right, Manoj, I know you from the Mountain House Salesforce user group out of just outside of San Francisco, California. You have a very humble intro slide here. Hopefully you'll tell us a little bit about yourself.
I got one intro slide, so I can bring it up. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hear you. I can see your main screen and it has your name and.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So yeah, thanks, Paul, for giving me opportunity to present on this group. I mean, really, your group looks variety of ways. It's a pretty big group and doing lots of things. Yeah, good work. So today we're gonna talk about single sign-on solution. I'm not gonna go deep dive in each concept, but I'm gonna try to touch upon each of the concepts which goes around single sign-on authentication, and this mainly with the Salesforce solution. So a little bit about myself. My name is Manoj Sonawane. I've been in IT more than 20 years. Half of the career I spent on .NET, and then half of the career on Salesforce. Currently, I'm working as a senior solution architect for one of the manufacturing company in Bay Area. So I'm group leader for Mountain House developer community, and also I do mentoring for super moms. It's been like 4 years I'm doing them. They've been in Europe actively, and then US from a couple of years, and they're helping a lot of moms and dads who want to get back to the work. So that's pretty strong cohort they have. It's paid program, and I keep volunteering for them. Additionally, I've been a speaker at once at Trello DX. Last year, due to pandemic, there are lots of opportunities to work in Bay Area. I got the opportunity to act in a couple of the films in like Dreamforce film, the Salesforce Tour film, and then yeah, I get an opportunity to attend the Dreamforce 21 in person. Yeah, I know Paul was there, but we didn't know that time each other. Also working with one of the my other friend as a co-founder and chief architect for the product LeadX 360. That's again has a lot of lead generation traffic and different tool altogether. Yeah, and as part of work, I do lots of things on integrations, React, JavaScript, Salesforce, and some of the things. Since I'm in manufacturing, it's like a structuring and manufacturing. We do lots of 3D engine and 3D technologies with Babylon JS. So yeah, so variety of things I do. So moving on to the main session. Okay, so I just want to let everyone, I'm not an identity expert. This is purely based on my past 20-year experience around authentication and all those various solutions which I have been built out, which I worked on, customized. So it's purely on that. So today we're going to touch upon identity management concepts, which is mainly how the session works. Why single sign-on first place, and then some of the flows of single sign-on like IDP initiated, SP initiated. We'll talk about those terms later. If time permits, I'll go through OAuth, one of the flow on OAuth, which is pretty common, and some of the additional authorization providers which are available in Salesforce. So the very first thing is we talk about authentication, and to understand authentication, the question comes about identity. Who are you? So in terms of enterprise, every day you log into your workstation. So you have to provide authentication, providing your credentials, like a username, password, and probably nowadays the strong authentication is like additional two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. You might have seen the Salesforce is enforcing MFA since this month, and there are lots of changes around everywhere enforcing those additional security things. So that's what authentication is like. Your credentials, and someone is going to verify your credentials and providing access to your system. Sometimes certificates also used as part of this authentication service. And in general scenario, you can think about like your driving license as your identity provider, kind of used as a authentication service. So if you go to any hotel where you have reservation, so very first they will ask for your identification, and the identification is basically your DL, which is provided by authorized government authorized department, and that tells you, okay, this is the person, and you can grant the access or services to. So that's what the authentication works. And the reason I'm talking through authentication authorization, because behind the scene, there are lots of details you need to understand as part of all the single sign-on solutions. So that's the very first concept of authentication. And the next part comes is once you have access to your resource or any services. So the next part comes is what you can do in that system. And that's the piece authorization. And authorization is basically, you don't get a full access. You might get full access or part of the access, part of the services or the system, but authorization decides what you can do in the system. And you might have seen that through your profiles and permission set, like setting up different users and how we basically provide authorization to the different users in different ways. In again, real scenario, think about Valet Key. So you're driving an expensive car and you're parking it somewhere. So Valet Key works as a possession of that whole ownership in parts. So meaning you can start a car, you can lock the doors, but you cannot open the trunk or other compartments of the car. And that's how the authorization plays in the role. And that's where the variety of solutions around, maybe if you see OAuth nowadays, that's pretty common. And that's the way OAuth is basically, it's basically one of the biggest protocol used into providing authorization from one service to another service. But in general, authentication and authorization, those are basically two concepts. One is like authentication is called an identity management concept, and the authorization called as a access management concept. So which basically determines the permission, the resources, and all those defined things. Okay, so there are some concepts, basic concepts of identity management I just want to go through before we go into single sign-on solution and why single sign-on solution. So very first thing is like a session tracking mechanism. So you need to understand session tracking mechanism, like how the session is established. So once you authenticated into system, so every system or every application will be storing that session in different forms, maybe the cookies, maybe you are rewriting, maybe the hidden form fields, or maybe the SSL sessions. So when you building around any these solutions, you need to understand how that mechanism works and how that's stored. The second part is basically the network security basics, mainly how the physical layer and higher layer works in terms of interacting with two systems. So the physical layer basically is where connection is established, which system is calling what system, and how they're basically interacting. You should know that. The higher level layer is basically maybe the network level security, the firewall, what IP address basically is calling to what, I mean, incoming and outgoing, any other network protocols, how security is. So those are the things basically you might have to understand in order to build any solutions around single sign-on or any authentication mechanism. And the third part here is basically there's always one broker who basically is a kind of middleware and helping to happen this handshake or transferring. So usually the browser is our most of the time the broker in web scenario. And the last piece is basically protocols. So what protocols you gonna follow for building your solution on single sign-on or authentication. So there are a variety of protocols, like very commonly used SAML, which is we're gonna go through that in next slide. But SAML is basically it's kind of industry standard protocol, which is a markup based language, and most of the products or SaaS based or thin client, thick client, they go easily with those protocols and for the authentication. That's why SAML 2.0 is widely used. Then there's a WS Federation, which can be used in all the cases where SAML protocol is. And then there's OAuth, which OAuth is not authentication, but it's an authorization part, but it works with OpenID Connect as the authentication. So OpenID Connect is a piece for authentication, and OAuth is basically authorization. And you might have heard like Windows, most of the protocols use Kerberos as well, one of the solution. So you need to understand what protocols are being followed for what system and what goes into your solution. So those are the variety of things sometimes you need to understand before building the solutions.
I love that you have these called out so clearly, Manoj. These are, if you want to be an architect, if you want to rise to a technical architect, this is kind of the table stakes for understanding what's going on outside of the ecosystem. This is almost your simplest and most common integration, and understanding each of these concepts clearly. This is a foundational building block for using Salesforce as a tool as opposed to just delivering solutions within it. So I love that these building blocks are there and expressed so clearly. And if you have questions about them, definitely dig into them if you are on architect path. This is Definitely advanced developer, architect, whatever you want to call it. This is, yeah, core foundational concepts of what's going on and where all of the security loopholes and the unhappy path are, where the hackers all get to you, where Waqas regularly speaks to us. But yeah, if you don't understand these, you don't understand how to put these tightly together, don't start architecting. This is table stakes for building big enterprise solutions. So love the slide. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and at the end, I might have some videos. So I've been learning and following those. So those are really good videos. You should look into that. That's a very neat and clean way they're explaining how the system works. So yeah. All right. So before we jump in, we just look at some definitions. Like we're calling about SAML. SAML is like security assertion markup language. It's a protocol that enables single sign-on between two applications, mainly the browser-based applications. So that's core. And SAML established from long time. There are 1.1, 1.2, and 2.1 is like a now standard and very established with that. So it's not that super complex, but it follows XML-based structure and lots of products. So if you build any product or any service, you should have mechanism so you can easily provide single sign-on with any IDP or any solution. So that's where this works really well. I have built my own IDP based on SAML in .NET like few years back, and that's basically you can do pretty much through code or through standard sophisticated way. Next thing is OAuth. OAuth is basically, again, open standard for authorization. The definition of OAuth is basically an open protocol to allow secure authorization in a simple standard method from any web or mobile or desktop application. So basically, allow users' information to be used by a third party. So if you one application is accessing another application's data without passing any credentials. So that's pretty much OAuth does. Then the federation is the next term. So you might have seen federation commonly termed in a variety of single sign-on solutions. So what federation means is like you have authenticated to a different system than the one you are trying to access. So based on the your identity proven by some other system. So it's like I know a person A and person A knows person B. So since the person C can get some resources to me because he trusts person A. So it's like a trust-based, claim-based access where the federation is mainly used. And then obviously the IDP, which is identity provider, and that's the main system or entity that creates or maintains and manages all those information for providing authentication services, like which is relying on within the federation or distribution network. So so IDPs there are a variety of IDPs. I'll show that on the next slide. But this is the main system who will be authenticating you, and once you're authenticated, it will be passing the token base or whatever mechanism we built out to allow access to other systems. And other system basically will be trusting the IDP. So other system is nothing but a service provider, and service provider is basically a system where the system entity where it provides services, but it depends on the IDP to allow the access. And these two systems are basically trusting each other, and that's how once you authenticate it into the provider, so it knows it can give access to any SPs, which is basically in his trust list. And again, the broker, we talk about that. That's mainly in the web scenario, browser is the broker where all the communication happens, and you should, when you're debugging or you're trying to find any loopholes in the system. So that's where you go and look all those two system flows. Okay, so these all identity management or all these use cases are there from decades. You might have seen like a simple login forms, which is cookie based, where you just provide basic authentication, and that's been there from long time. And single sign-on across sites using SAML, that's been there. We have seen the versions now. 2.0 is a very standard. Lots of people are doing, not just now, but it's been doing long time. Mobile app authentication works differently because sometimes you have to keep persisted your session, even if you close your app and all those things. And the last piece is delegated authorization, which is again pretty old terminology where let website access someone data using some web services. Now it's a sophisticated way, which is a OAuth. So those are some of the use cases we have been seeing in a long time, and you might be facing those or using those in day-to-day life. I just wanted to go through those use cases. Now, we're just gonna see why we need a single sign-on, what's the basically problem, and why does the federation exist in first place. Okay, so Genesis here is basically you have in your enterprise your simple login form. That's our basic authentication method where your employee want to access system A, system B, system C, and that's pretty much you can remember 3 passwords and you can access day to day. That's very generic, but as you grow, yeah, your company or enterprise decides to have your Active Directory and make sure every app goes through Active Directory. And that's where you change your authentication mechanism to Windows authentication, which is a based off your Active Directory or whatever the provider you have. So now we're transitioning from simple to little sophisticated Windows authentication. And now we are putting another mix here, like the on-premise apps are good, but what about the SaaS-based cloud apps like Salesforce, Workday? Those we cannot put directly on Active Directory. Those are cloud-based, those are authenticated, and all those credentials are stored on those sites. So if you want to use Active Directory for those applications, yeah, you can do that. Technically you can do that, but I would say, that would be really bad design, like copying probably the passwords into different system and syncing those and making sure you try to use those credentials for access where you don't have trust, or if you during the offboarding process mainly you'll have a lot of challenges like who left the company and you don't have a way to sync those or manage those, or so there will be a lot of challenges on those, and that's not a good design. And that's where we cannot go with these like SaaS based or the application which is outside your domain. How are you gonna build those seamless authentication? So that's where single sign-on comes in play. And single sign-on, again, it works based on the trust, which is based on the SAML token, which you call if you're building a SAML. So it's like I know you and you know third person, so you can get into the system. So all the time in this scenario, if the employee want to access Salesforce, they will first try to access Salesforce, and then if not, the Salesforce says, I don't know you, then it will throw you back to the IDP. IDP will authenticate you, and then it will throw back to the system where you can authorize services. So it's claim-based and purely federation here, and that's why this is very common and very easy solution and secure solution. That's where single sign-on exists. And you can see with the rise of these variety of solutions on not just single sign-on, but doing the provisioning, now the MFA, and then additional security things. So there are lots of standard IDPs exist in market. We use Okta. I use Okta. In my current company, use Okta. My previous also use Okta. But there are like others like One Login, Duo, which is from I guess Cisco, RSA, Ping Identity. There's one from IBM and Microsoft AD Azure, Oracle. So yeah, there are a variety of things, or you can build your own. As I mentioned, I build my own using code itself to host it on-premise and worked with some identity provider to store the credentials, and we basically built using the code. So I guess you might have seen your day-to-day any work, one of these Active Directory, IDPs, and sometimes there's a different learning curve, how to administer, how to monitor, there are lots of things on those specific products itself. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the flows, single sign-on flows. If anyone has any questions, I can take a pause and I can take those questions. Otherwise, we'll just jump into the flows and some demos.
Haven't seen any questions come across the chat. This is all super clear, so love it. This is stuff I spent years trying to figure out. And I was there when some of it was growing up and being born, and it's still hard to understand. So this is a great level, great intro.
Yeah, great. If it's helping, that's good. So, I mean, when you build any single sign-on solution, always you have to look into two flows. When it's IDP initiated flow, which is meaning the flow which is started from your IDP. Let's say Axiom here is a tool I'm going to use for my demonstration, which is a Salesforce Labs tool, which is a browser-based tool where you can just create some bunch of configuration, plug it into Salesforce, and you can handshake using single sign-on, and you can test your single sign-on solution. So, sorry, my mouse is so sensitive. Okay. Here you can see the very first step here is like a handshake between two systems where you do the configuration, and one of the major part here is X509 certificate. So how does this basically Axiom trust Salesforce? Because in this case, Axiom is IDP and Salesforce is SP, service provider. And when we do this handshake, okay, Axiom says, okay, this is my certificate with public key, and you can host it on your side. And whenever basically I get a request from you or any token from my side, so you can trust that and authenticate the user. So once we see the demo, you can see how the certificate basically we set up, how we see that in token. So that's where basically the public key certificate is on Salesforce SP side, and the private key is on the IDP side, which basically knows and it basically can trust the system and allow the authentication. And again, so the very first is setup, and then you basically go here to your IDP, then you log in, and then once you're logged in, then it provides you the redirects back to the your service provider with the SAML assertion token, and that's where the service provider, once it gets, it knows, okay, I can trust this token, and token has two things like this: the certificate and the key somewhere, some key to identify which user to authenticate. So we'll get into that. So this is one of the flow which is very common. And we'll talk about the SP initiated flow, which is a little variation to the same flow. Okay, so let me jump onto the browser. Okay, you can see my browser, right? All right, so I have my IDP Axiom and I have my SP in the Salesforce dev org. The very first thing in Salesforce side is you might have done this. This is a very simple step. Single sign-on settings. So I already set up. Yeah, I already set up one IDP here. This is for my next demo because it takes some back and forth things. But I'm going to set up new with Axiom, and that will be our for IDP initiated. So very first thing you have to do is like enable this SAML, and then it will allow you to do single sign-on, and then you can set up a new setting using these three options where you can do manually, or you can download metadata from your IDP or using the URL from the IDP. So we're going to do manual here. And then while we do this setup, I'll go through some of the things. So here on the Axiom side, I'm going to use a SAML, and SAML, there's clear installation steps here. Like the first is a download the identity where it provides a certificate. So this is IDP certificate where we need the certificate to install on this SP side. And that's the X509 certificate, which does the handshake, which basically builds the trust between these two systems. So I already downloaded. I'm gonna go here and just apply this. Okay. So I can put some name here. So now issuer, basically this has to match with what I'm gonna generate here. So I'm gonna go here and generate SAML response. That will help me to do. Okay, so here you can see you can test with 1.0 and 2.0. So I'll use 2.0. And then this is basically whatever the key you put here, Axiom, that's the same you need to use on the other side. And that's the issuer has to match. Now, identity ID here, this is generic, but if you have custom domain, so nowadays, whenever you build any dev org, it comes with a custom domain. And that's where you have to change this to match your custom domain. So I'm going to grab this from my notepad. So this is my custom domain. And I'm going to put this identity key here, and I'm going to modify this to match what I put there. It will work if you use login.salesforce.com and just keep it like the plain one, it will work. But if you have custom domain, you have to make sure everything is configured per your custom domain. And then here, basically, so recipient URL will be the Salesforce domain, start URL will be the same. And then this is the basically IDP kind of a service where you need to plug into other side here. So in case someone trying to access some resource, so it knows where to send you back and where to get authenticated. So that's pretty much here. We're not going to change any signature method or encryption decryption method here. The interesting thing here is the identity type, where you need to understand how you're gonna. So now you got the token, but how system is going to authenticate the user, either based on the username or some identifier or the user ID. So let's go with the Salesforce username for our first scenario. And there's here small checkbox here, user provisioning. I'll show that again in the next demo. But this is mainly used when you want to, let's say on the IDP side, you have one profile and you want to sync that profile back to all the systems whenever you do the federation. So this allows you to do that. And we can show that, I mean, this tool itself. So let's save this configuration. So once you save this configuration, it will generate a couple URLs, which you can copy and put that back into your settings here, like a logout URL, login URL, all those things. So that's pretty much it. And I think our solution should work. Let me log out from system. Okay, and then I'll go here. I need to put my username. So my username here is so this is my username, and I think we have everything. And let's say request SAML. So you can see it generated SAML token for me. So in broker, you will see this encoded one, base 64. Since this tool allowing me to parse this in SAML format, I can see that here. Same, there's some Chrome extension you can install and you can parse it. If there's a SAML post, you can parse that and understand that. So in this, mainly you can see this is my X509 certificate data. So that's the certificate which does the handshake. And you can see the name ID, which is my identifier. And that's two key information will authenticate me in Salesforce based on this token. So let's try this. Click on this login. Okay, it worked. So, so this is a pretty easy setup. Looks in both the side, but behind the scene, you can see there are a bunch of information going and it's identifying and pulling your record and authenticating and setting up this session. So those are all happening behind the scenes. That's our IDP initiated flow where you started with Axiom and logged in, and then you ended up here. Now let's change this a little bit. Let me go back to this configuration.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
It's more like I'm curious what's going on. So you get, so Axiom gets the certificate, right? So you install that certificate in Salesforce. You downloaded that and you set it up in Salesforce, right?
Right, that's a public key certificate, yes.
Public certificate. Now, if someone is using a Wireshark, they can get access to that, to all the binary data, right? And can they log into Salesforce using all that?
No. So this is time bound. These all tokens are time bound. Those will be expired momentarily. Plus, even if you get a hold of that, it will not work because the IDP who generated that has the all the private keys for the certificate. And I mean, you can have this token, but you don't know a way to authenticate your credentials to generate this token. And this token, you cannot use it for, I mean, you cannot do the post and generate this. That's where, I mean, it's trust-based, right? So you can copy the SAML, you can pretty much do that. But if you try to use it, it will not work because it has a very time-sensitive expiration and it will not allow you to do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there's another piece here. I have experience in past because when I built my IDP, it was hosted in Pacific time, and then I had another system which is in Central time in Europe. So both the systems should have a clock working in the same time zone, or the it should match. Otherwise, this all these sessions will never work because it has some limitation on time bound.
So both the systems should have the same, like they should know each other's time, right?
Both the systems clock should have a similar time. Otherwise, you will have
Similar
that.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
isn't there a part of the back end? I swear I saw this when setting this up a couple of weeks ago, and a tool to help debug is really nice because all this communication is private and goes on behind the scenes, and there's really no visibility to it. But I think there's a Salesforce piece that will show you or validate a SAML
yes.
packet.
Yes.
How is Axiom different than that?
Axiom is just I mean, this is just like a Heroku app. I mean, I can build my own for testing, or I can use IDP. Salesforce piece is basically, you're talking about that SAML.
It's like a SAML assertion validator or something like
yeah,
that.
So I'll come to
setup.
that. Yeah, I'll come to that. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the next thing. Yeah. So now probably you can see my username is working, but I don't want my employees to use username. I want to use maybe some identifier, maybe phone number, or some company employee ID. Okay, so now since I'm already logged in here, let me log out, and I'll not change anything, and I'll just change my username to something else. So probably this will not work and it will fail. So you get an error. Now, this is expected because in backside, we are expecting username and we put some key. So let me log in backdoor here. So again, when you implement single sign-on, everyone will be doing the SSO, but there has to be backdoor entry for admins and all. And that is something when you have to put the guidelines, what goes where and who can log in, how. Okay, so now we can go back to Paul, what you're asking, right? So let's look into that validator. It helps you to understand the last request, what happened to that. So it's basically, it's parsing that and it's showing you in very formatted fashion. Okay, everything worked well, but it was not, not able to map the user because we're expecting username here and you put something number, and that's why it failed. So if there's any other error in your token, for example, the time steps. So this is very common. Like if you have two systems, clock is different, and you're trying to generate token and put it here, it will never work. So so you can basically parse if someone is complaining what I'm not able to log in with single sign-on. You can go back and validate this, or you can copy the this base 64 token here, and you can basically validate and parse it here. This is just another way to format it and see it. Make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, so now I'm gonna go here and change this to Federation ID, save this, and then I'm gonna go to my user. Okay, so I just fixed my last name to Sonawane, and there's a one field down here. Oops, not here.
Now go to the user record. Yeah.
No, my Zoom meeting video is coming in between. I'm not able to click this. Okay, so here.
There you go. Yeah.
So you can see I just updated this yesterday, the Federation ID. So I'm going to use, instead of username, I'm going to use some key or identifier, which will allow. So if you choose that path, so you have to make sure all your user records are updated with whatever the identifier they are identified in your enterprise world. Otherwise, it will not work. So okay, this is all set. And now I'm gonna, and one more thing you can notice here, my name is Manoj Sonawane. So we have another use case which will show the just-in-time provisioning feature. So I log out from here again, and then let's go back to this configuration. I'll go one more step back to get a fresh token. So we're using Federation ID here, and then rest of the configuration same, and then request. You can see this might have changed to my ID, the name ID. Yeah, this name ID is coming now, my identifier. Rest everything is same, and I'm gonna just log in. So that approach also worked. Now let's look at the provisioning, how that works. So provisioning is basically important in more variety of systems where if you want to keep the profile same, let's say your Active Directory is a system of records. So if you updated phone number, maybe the address or last name, first name, we want to keep syncing with all the systems which are integrated. And that's where provisioning works. So here, Salesforce allows to do that. Obviously, you cannot delete or deactivate users to the provisioning, but you can pretty much, change the some of the attributes. So let's try this. So I put this as a standard. You can build your own handler and do variety customization on here. And I'll save this, and you can see my first name and last name is Manoj Sonawane, and I'll just log out from here and I'll go back to again Axiom here. So here again, they have provided one section to test this tool. So how do you pass the details? So it's pretty simple in this tool. I'm gonna just say user and the last name, whatever I can say. Okay, so, and I will generate this request. So now again, this attribute will be included as part of my token, the last name here. And if I say login, so it's doing two things. One is it is allowing access, and while allowing access, it will update my last name as well. So if I go here, you can see my last name is updated to Dallas Group. So that's a powerful provisioning feature. So this tool is giving pretty simple way, but if you go to IDPs, they have sophisticated way, which does variety things, mapping, and some additional logics, and yeah, a lot of stuff there. So this is the IDP initiated flow. Any questions so far? We can take those, or I can go to the next flow. Okay, so let me bring another screen. So we talk about this. This is pretty much set up, and then the two systems interact with each other. SP initiated flow here is a little different, where let's say you got an email with a link in an email, which is going to the Salesforce report or some Salesforce page, which is secure page. And you are basically clicking that link from the email, or you have deep linking or bookmark, which basically takes you to your favorite page or your specific page on Salesforce, which is secure one. And you're starting with a fresh browser where you don't have session. Now that's the SP initiated flow, where you're starting with the service provider link, which is the resource actually, which you want to see, but it's not yet authenticated. And that's where you go to that resource, and Salesforce will say, okay, I don't see any valid session and I don't know you. And that's where, so this first step is basically pretty much the same. That's a single sign-on setup. And I'm here using Okta, but the rest of stuff is like you go to Salesforce and Salesforce say, I don't know you, it will send you back to the in step 4 here, Okta. Okta will say, okay, I don't know you either. You need to punch in your credentials. It will allow punching credentials. And once you get authenticated, okay, and now it will see whether you are allowed to access the system, and then it will basically directly jump you back onto the Salesforce. So when you access any secure resource, so either it will bring up you the Okta login screen, and then once you log in, it will bring back to you this screen. It will not take you to the Okta homepage where you can click Salesforce and then go there. So basically try to carry your real estate in this whole transition. And when this comes back, it will come as a SAML request, which will be asking, okay, it's asking for this request, this resource, and it will have some real estate, and that will be carried all over in this transition. And that's how once you authenticate it, whenever the final token comes, it knows where to land you. So that's what the real estate is termed as. So you can define your landing page in your solutions, whichever you want. But in this transition, it takes the precedence of where you're coming from. It's like a redirect URL. So that's the variation of this flow, and we can see that flow, how that works. So for this, I already set up Okta. Okta has a trial, 30 days trial. You can register and get trial org using your any corporate ID. So let me log into the Okta. Okay, so now on Okta side, I'll just go through how, just walk you through how the settings are done, the way we did Axiom. So here you can see this app, which is already there, but you can go to admin and you'll have a bunch of templates provided by the OM and IDPs where you don't have to do a lot of stuff. It will just carry all those configuration, and you just have to update those configuration. So let me log in as an admin. And if you are using MFA and kind of service provider, you will see this screen now onwards for Salesforce logins. Okay, so in this apps, I'll just open the configured app, but you can browse like a Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, all those SaaS-based apps, they have templates, and you just implement those. And then you can see there are a bunch of things you can do, like provisioning or the variety import exports and all those things for integrations. But let's look at some of the basic configuration here. The basic is like you choose your environment here, and then since we're going to do the custom domain, you need to just put your custom domain. So whenever you go to custom domain, it will take you to the single sign-on flow. And that's pretty much basic here. You can have limited numbers and all those things. Configuration here. The next piece here is sign-on, where you can choose a sign-on method. And we are using single sign-on here with the SAML 2.0. And then once you decide this, so it will bring up, let me open in another browser window. Yeah, it gives you all the instructions, what you need to do on the other side. So the same thing which we did just now, but interesting thing here is like you need to get the issuer name, which you need to plug into Salesforce side, the certificate you need to download from here, and the identity provider login, which is something you need to provide on the single sign-on side, setting side, and the domain, whatever the entity ID which you're going to use here. So entity ID in domain. So these are the all steps they have provided based on my configuration. This is not generic. This is based on my configuration, and you just have to copy paste and set up your configuration here. So if you go, if you open the Okta, so it has the same, like this is your certificate, which I already downloaded and added here, and this provider URL. So that's pretty much it here. So this is, I just want to show you how you can set up the any provider. Every provider will have a different configuration, but it's straightforward and what you need to do. There are some advanced setup here, which you can do, but once you set up this, the next step is basically you need to allow access. So we use AD groups and variety things to allow access. Here, I'm just a one user, so I added myself, allow access to this app. And now, again, so if you go back here, it is saying identity type is username. So I need to make sure my username is matching what I'm passing here, right? So this is not my username. This is my maybe Active Directory name. Most of the time it will match, but here it's different. That's why I have to put it on top of it. So whenever I do single sign-on, it knows and it does the what it needs to be. Okay, so this is about the configuration of IDP, and here's the provisioning piece where it does deeper, and it has a variety of ways to do that. I've worked on one of the ServiceNow integration where did complex provisioning, but yeah, there's good stuff to understand and learn during the identity management, during the certification as well. You'll help on those slides. So now I'm logged in here, and I'll just make sure it works, and then I'll open my org. It works. Okay, so now, so let's say I want to show you the flow, which is the SP initiated flow, and I will go here and so let's say I want to go to specific account page, this one, and then we'll see how that flow goes. Now, before doing this, what I want is I want to show another configuration. Since we are here, like some training apps and all LMS apps, they have different mechanism. Sometimes you have to only honor the IDP initiated flows. Sometimes you have to shut down these CSP initiated flows. Sometimes you provide provisioning. Sometimes you have to disable those. There are kind of variety of use cases you will experience. It looks simple, but behind the scene, there are variety things you need to make sure, understand, and which works, which not, which needs to be done, which not to be done. So that's the whole, I wanted to show these two single sign-on flows. Okay, so Paul, are you back?
I am back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So
hopefully that didn't interrupt anybody.
I think the recording was stopped in between, but that's fine. We're good. So how much time still we have?
As much as you want. You've got more content, we'll take it. Do we have any questions?
Manoj, this is Moyez.
Yes.
Manoj, in most applications that you work with, are you seeing companies use more of the SP initiated login, or are you seeing more companies rotating towards IDP initiated logins?
Yeah, mostly, I mean, For enterprise world, IDP is the default way, but SP is kicked in only if you have bookmarks, or let's say you got an email saying, oh, here's your ticket, and you can open this ticket, and then you click that link, and that does the SP things, which is like a secondary always. But if you're going workstation, I want to open my workday, I will go to Okta and just open that. I will go to Okta and I have a dashboard. All the apps are there. I want to open my Concur request, so I can just go there and open that instead of finding some bookmark or something. So it's like my corporate intranet site where it's my hub that I can just start
Correct.
from there.
Yeah, so they give you Okta gives you a dashboard, and you can log into one of any number of
Right.
applications. Okay, yeah.
Right. So when I logged into my trial Okta, there was only one app, which is Salesforce, but in real scenario, there'll be like
Multiple.
all the apps, multiple.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so
Manoj, sorry, I have a question, a very quick one.
yes.
So if I have a two-factor authentication, I have to set that up in Okta, right?
Yeah, so if you are using service provider, then multi-factor or two-factor, everything goes with Okta. So with the MFA, which Salesforce is mandating, for those, they given guidelines, okay, this works with Salesforce if you are the inbuilt Salesforce, but if you are using service provider, then you basically comply with what is in works for your company, what as per security, and what the provider basically allows you to do that. So for example, in my company, we use Okta, and the Okta Verify app is the default mechanism to get your token, and there are other bunch of methods we have added. And that's not something Salesforce recommends, but that goes with Salesforce compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Manoj, talking about MFA, there's one thing that's been causing a lot of confusion in my mind, partly because I'm an old man, but I think also partly because there is confusion in how MFA should be implemented in Salesforce. And that is, the way that Salesforce is asking us to do it, there's a permission set, MFA permission set that you assign to those users who are coming in username, password. And what I don't fully understand is what is the purpose of that permission set being assigned if your users are coming in via
Single sign-on.
Single sign-on, where the IDP is somebody other than Salesforce.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, and that's something we have been seeing that. So we're saying, okay, everyone log in through my custom domain, right? Like if you want to log into your Salesforce, we're saying go to my Okta page, Okta URL, and from there you log in. So that's what the custom domain. I'm not going login.salesforce.com because login.salesforce.com is a generic. It doesn't know where you're coming from. It doesn't know you're coming from single sign-on and all. So
Right.
That's where, if you're smart, like any of the user, he knows the way to cheat it.
Right.
So that's where we want to make sure we are compliant with Salesforce, what Salesforce is asking.
Yeah.
So our admins are going to do that route for some reason, or maybe one or two admins, backdoor entry, that's what we call. But one of the business user, he knows Salesforce a little bit, and he go on login.com and he does a login through its credentials. Then we don't want that go without MFA. And that's where we have to do MFA for all users. If someone try to cheat, they will have to set up MFA, which is Salesforce inbuilt.
So as a default, then, are you giving everybody the permission set for MFA? Is that your default way of thinking? Is you just assign
Yes.
it to everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Right.
Regardless. Okay.
I mean, there's a one way you can stop everyone login, like disabling that login.salesforce.com, but that disables to everyone, even admin. So we want to do that. So that's why we keep everyone, we train everyone use custom domain, and that will kick off single sign-on,
Okay.
company provided. But if someone does not, then like a mobile app, a lot of people get confused. Mobile app screen always shows a basic authentication, which is Salesforce credentials first. And then you want to use single sign-on, you have to use the custom domain. There's a one click, put that custom domain, and then it kicks single sign-on.
Right.
So a lot of users get confused, and they might have coming already to login directly, and that's where we can stop them.
Got it. Okay. So no adverse effect if I assign everybody across the board the MFA permission set.
Yeah, no effect as long as they're able to log in single sign-on, nothing will impact them.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think last thing I will just quickly show, not too much, but OAuth flow. And OAuth is a very big topic, and it requires a special session, and it has so many things, and there are a variety of good videos. I put one in my shared link, resource link. So let me bring back the screen. Okay, so we're looking web server OAuth flow. So there are like almost 8-9 flows supported by Salesforce, like a web server flow, user agent flow, the username password combination flow, SAML, bearer assertion, a variety of things. So and it used in multiple ways. So first thing, what is OAuth? OAuth is basically if you are using Facebook and you are installing any app on Facebook or some game or some app, and when you try to access that, it basically pops up like a screen, allow or deny, and then that's where actually it's trying to access the resources. So, I mean, you're using your the mechanism of OAuth, it's trying to access some resources from your Facebook account, but not, it won't be able to do any post or anything beyond that. So it's just accessing on data. So the common use case for our Salesforce developers, like you go to Workbench, right? And you open and connect your Salesforce org. So you get the pop-up asking, okay, I'm giving permission to use my credentials and access some of the resources from salesforce.com. So it's basically one service is accessing another service, the data. And that is very common nowadays, and we are using that day to day. We don't know that's OAuth, and that's very sophisticated way where two systems are talking without passing any credentials, and that's the of it. Like it works on the open standard protocol, where it exchanges information and gets a token, and once the token is access token is there, you basically allow the access, the limited access, whatever the access you are provided for that service. So that way you can control the authorization. You're not giving complete access, and you are not exposing the password. So that's the basics of OAuth. And you can see here in Salesforce world, here you can see this is one. First is like a configuration happens through connected application. So I have done one configuration with the OAuth, and then basically you try to attempt, it connects, and there are variety happens in between. So let me go to Axiom, and that has another diagram which can, yeah, it has one tester as well, OAuth tester, and it has, yeah. So 2.0 flow is like one simple diagram here, where, so here's a consumer which is trying to access some resource, right? So it asks you to log in to that resource first. Once you log in, you allow your authentication part is done here, and then it sends the one request to get the authorization code. So it goes in two parts. So first it gets a authorization code, and then once you pass that, you provide a so here you provide a one key, and in second attempt you provide the two keys, which is another security key, and that's where you get this access token. Now so there's a structure of how the token comes: access token, refresh token, and then variety of things. So when you implement OAuth, you need to understand that. And once you have that access token and refresh token, you don't need to go back to all this route, and you can keep continuing the session as long as you want. And once that is done, you can access the resource. So this is looks simple, but if you have done any API integrations and all this, you might be using this already, retrieving those tokens and using it. So so here, let's say I go back to my Salesforce.
Now, I'm watching and I don't see you log into Axiom. Is this your company a pay tool or is this a free tool?
It's a Salesforce Labs free tool. You can fork on GitHub. It's just a tool for your integration. You can test it, or you can build your own.
You wrote this?
No. This is by Salesforce Labs.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll quickly show you the configuration on. I mean, you might have built connected apps, but I'll quickly show you configuration on connected apps on Salesforce.org. And probably this will be the last demo. We can stop there. I know it's long.
No, it's good. We still have a bunch of people still on, so they either fell asleep or they're really interested. My vote's the latter. So good topic. This is great, and this is such a, you don't get exposure to this very much because it gets done once on a project and then it's over. So
Yeah, most
learning
of the
about
time,
it's hard.
Yeah, IT, other side people will be doing, and you just plug in and done. Okay, so demo app. So this is the app I created, a connected app. And if I open this app, so you can see so callback URL. So I put callback URL here is basically this one, which is coming from my the Axiom side, which is going to connect and get some resources. And then this is where you allow access. So I'm putting everything, but you can say only, you can access only maybe Visual Force application or specific part of your application. That's where you control your access. And then once you save it, it takes some time and you get some keys here. And that's where this consumer key, I'm going to copy this, will be required for this call. And then I'm going to use my domain here instead of login.salesforce.com. Okay, and then I will send this. So this is where I'm sending to get authorization code. Okay, so it came back with an access token URL where it is only allowing this guy to get access token since you proved your identity, and now it's asking consumer secret here. And that's where the next part comes here. This will secret. I can copy this part, put it here, and done. So now this is basically going to give me a token which can access the resources. And this is my token. You can see I didn't see the allow window because yesterday I did the same and I got that window. So it didn't ask me that allow or deny window. But you can see it generated access token, refresh token, which basically for this instance URL. And then once this is expired, you can use this token to get another access token. You don't have to go back to all authorization code and all. So this is pretty simple flow, but implementation can go very complex and need to understand variety of things and OAuth, how that protocol works and different flows works and how the two systems interact, what can do, what not. But nowadays it's very common and you might not sense it's already OAuth. So I guess that's pretty much on the demo side. And then I will just pull up my slides again. So Salesforce has a provider flows as well. So if you, let's say you want to use Facebook as a authentication instead of Salesforce, you can do that. And again, there has to be configuration on both the side, and you can use a Salesforce provider or Google provider, or you can build your own provider to do the authentication service. So that's the provision there. Probably that's another big topic, and there's a various setup we need to follow. But that's another way you need to understand different mechanism for authentication. It's available. Delegated authorization flow is again visitor based, endpoint based, and something similar like OAuth. So now talking about resources. So yeah, this video, YouTube video, this is a really awesome video. It's a pretty long, but it explains very in general way, not like too much technical, but you can understand the variety of scenarios, what I was trying to explain. And then, yeah, there's another on this OAuth, which is one of the Dreamforce video recently, like 2018, and that also covers major of the OAuth flows. So I guess that's all I have. Hope you got some learning, some understanding, and this is the basics of security and single sign-on.
That was phenomenal. That was way more than I expected, and very deep and very, very useful. So I hope everybody got a lot out of that. I had to flail against SSO recently, and I wish I'd had some of these tools at hand and the knowledge to be able to go through and troubleshoot. Turned out I was hitting a WAF for some of my big problem, and also there's some weird bug that Azure has with the ability to put a URL in there as an SSO provider, and that just doesn't work with Azure AD right now. You have to do a file, and I ran my head against that wall for a couple of days before I found a tidbit somewhere. So this was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
Nicely done, Manoj. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
So
If anybody else has any
questions?
questions,
Yep,
it's still open.
you
If you
can
can't talk, raise your hand. I think everybody's got the ability. Boris, you were on off mute for a while. Did you have a question?
Yeah, but I think I understood the answer. I was looking like at my work. We have single sign-on, but sometimes I want to be able to, when I make a sandbox copy, then the single sign-on is configured, but my password, my admin password, is lost. So I don't know how to log in after I made a sandbox copy from the from the org that was single sign-on. Is there any
I think, yeah, for those you always go backdoor, not single sign-on, unless you configure your single sign-on to go back to where it has to, because the copy will go, I mean, sandbox refresh or whatever, it will copy all the configuration, but it will not work for you. So that's why always admins in those scenarios use a backdoor, which is your Salesforce credentials, not the single sign-on.
Yeah, that's a sandbox copy setting. It usually, I think you set a pattern for the user IDs and everything. So the user IDs are copied down different and the passwords are not. So I think an admin has to do a reset password on every sandbox ID. Not only does it get a new username, but it should use the same email address, but I think it scrambles the password for sandbox creation.
You need to disable your profile SSO enabled user, otherwise you will not be able to reset the password.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because if the username changes, then the assertion will still have the real username, and the sandbox usually has the username with dot whatever. The username has to be unique in all environments. So your username would be something at gmail.com.sandbox to make it unique. But the SSO assertion wouldn't know that new user ID is there. But so if it's copying the federation ID down, it would though. Is that correct? Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here.
No, Federation ID, it might work, but usually in my enterprise world, I mean, what we do, we have preview version of my IDP. So, and that sort connects to all the sandboxes and everyone. So we change basically when we move from production. So we switch all those configuration to point to our Okta preview. And that's where we ask people to, if you want to use single sign-on, go that way. Or we can explicitly disable the single sign-on on sandbox and regenerate their password. And then
Oh yeah, well the single sign-on would be going to a new instance with a new username, so it wouldn't be valid for the SSO setup. You'd have to do, you have to do an independent SSO setup. Then if the Federation ID is there, it should work as long as it's inserted the same.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Boris,
Yeah, usually disable and
to,
reset, that works best.
Boris, are you able to log into the sandbox by going into your production org and then going to the sandboxes and logging in that way, or is that also disabled?
Yeah,
No,
like
you can,
like
you
disabled.
can unless you set up. So you can have on your IDP 10 different Salesforce apps, which can, one goes to my production org, one goes to my sandbox org, one goes to maybe my Europe org. But everywhere you have to set up how that login should be, like a Federation ID or specific username, or whatever it is. So you have to configure that way. But when you copy, it will not work. I mean, when you fresh sandbox you created, it should not work unless you change that configuration to make it correct.
Well, what I'm wondering is, like, Boris's challenge is that he's created a new sandbox, and now he's unable to log into that sandbox at all.
Right.
So what is that? What is the best way of going in there and reconfiguring it, right?
So if you have spin up that sandbox, so you are the admin and you should have backdoor entry to that, like the way we go to login.salesforce.com. So you just go test.salesforce.com, you punch in your username, you already know the username, and password will be your production password. Unless you don't have production password, then there's a challenge.
Right, I do not have production password. Like I am admin on my org, but I always sign on with single sign.
Yeah, so someone should have that password. Someone should have password.
Yeah, I just need to probably hunt somebody to find the password.
Yeah, someone should have that password for backdoor entry. Or whoever does the single sign-on setup, they need to correct these settings to make sure it works with different settings.
Yeah, I'm actually working with it right now, so I'll update you guys once I figure out.
Yeah.
And I guess it would be the same thing for the communities, right? Communities in the portals. So if you have a partner community, customer community.
Yeah, I mean, that will be a different configuration, right?
Yeah. Each single sign-on should work only for the URL domain that it was configured for. So if you go to Okta and you say it's cnn.salesforce.com, if you spin up a new sandbox, it'll no longer be cnn.salesforce.com, it'll be devorg.mysalesforce.com. Okta should not answer or allow you to participate in exchange from a domain that is not set up for it to answer to. So new dev sandboxes require new single sign-on setup configurations, because that validation of the URL that you're being redirected back to is part of the exchange.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and that's where, like, even if you have single sign-on, people can go login.salesforce.com, and that might confuse, and that's where the MFA things, we have to put everyone on that backdoor MFA as well, the salesperson.
And there are some exceptions for the MFA. I think I heard somebody discussing, like, if you have your domain VPN locked down to only network credentials where you've already authenticated someplace else, that can get you out of or a voucher exemption from the MFA must. So there are some discussions that happen around it. I mean, I support going multi-factor everywhere possible, but it is still a subjective conversation behind the scenes, if that helps anybody.
Yeah, they are making exemptions and even extensions as well. So we haven't gone live yet with the MFA for my company. We're still working on. We got 6-month extension, and there are lots of pieces we have to do because of Europe standards, and people don't want to use personal phone and
Yeah.
so many things.
Cool. All right, I think we've quieted down. I've got a 10 out of 10 on survey responses. So thank you again, Manoj. Really appreciated everybody coming, making this a good discussion. Moyes, thank you, and we'll see you next month. Waqaz, everybody else, panel, thank you. And we will see you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.